is Stories Untold. It is your show about ordinary Africans with extraordinary tales. And we pride ourselves with the ability to share stories of marginalized communities from their own perspective. I am Pule Molebati. Welcome to the show. Today, we follow activists as well as women who are taking up space in the corporate sector. We look at albinism from a whole new perspective.
In 2019, Abongile Xhantini was selected as one of the Nelson Mandelas of our generation by the Nelson Mandela Foundation. To this day, the advocacy that landed her this prestigious position is still very much alive in her life.
When I found out that I was nominated by the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund to be one of the young Nelson Mandelas of my generation. Hi everyone, it's Abongile.
Abongile champions the cause for the marginalized in society, minorities' constitutional rights and inclusive growth through insights, gathering, consulting, and just by being herself.
I categorize myself as ABS, who's an activist and a diversity and inclusion activist. From my perspective, it means that I am actively engaged with society. I am engaged with issues of diversity. I am always looking for ways to mainstream persons with impairments and persons with albinism.
Recent South African stats show that there are only a few companies that are intentional about giving equal opportunities to the marginalized.
I think there are so many of us and we aren't infiltrated into society. And it's not that we aren't there, it's that systems have segregated us and marginalized us. So mine is to deliberately make sure that we are being included, whether it's looking at UN policies, whether it's looking at business strategies, whether it's looking at the ways in which we do business and reasonable accommodation and certain trainings and programs. That's how my activism comes out in various platforms, through NGOs, through businesses, but also through my everyday life, every day, because I can't take my impairments away and put them in the closet when I'm in space. So it also means always being true to myself and representing myself and making sure that in my standing up for myself in that certain injustice in that society, I'm also making sure that another person doesn't face it.
Abs, as she is affectionately known, shares with us about her daily struggles in public spaces.
When I go somewhere, people are going, "No, blind, agaboni," and she can't see. And in the beginning, I used to correct them. I wanted them to know that, no, I'm not blind. And then I got to a point where I was like, but wait, I don't have to explain it. But also there's a level of awareness. So instead of fighting back, I should be okay with the fact that there is an awareness, because sometimes there's no awareness at all. And it's difficult for me to be in spaces.
It was only in her adulthood that she had to adjust to a whole new world.
Started realizing that when I was working, I needed other resources to be in space. When I was in primary school, I was in Saxonwold, nice, secure suburb, not a lot of chaos. Roads, when I went to high school, I was in a boarding school, nice and secure, away from society. Now I'm going back to work at Wits and UN Brom, and there are cars and everything. And I realized that it was overwhelming for me. I couldn't tell when to pass. I couldn't figure out when lights were working, and especially when they weren't. What did that mean for me? And I realized it was stressful.
Through the help of her friend and guide dog, Pom Pom, and meditation, Abongile had to find ways to center her peace.
So I started going to the Guide Dogs Association, and I signed up for a guide dog. And through them, I was able to start training. Then I decided to then get my own service dog, And he does more than just help me in space. He helps me regulate my stress. He helps me regulate, he's my protector in space. Sometimes I get emotionally unsafe in spaces. So when he's there, he helps me identify certain triggers, certain areas.
This young woman also helps businesses to implement change in terms of diversity and inclusion. We accompanied Abongile as she visited Hilton Tienason, Growth Wheel SA's CEO.
I've worked with Growth Wheel South Africa, and he's got new hires that have impairments, and he has recently recruited all staff, I think, about 12 individuals with impairments. So I'm sort of helping him, and in fact, this is one of the organizations that Innovation is working with as well.
Hi, Hilton. How you doing? Oh my God.
We are helping them to establish how to manage the systems that empower their staff. We are working with how to assist them restructure their processes, what sort of policies to consider, what it actually means to have a person with a certain impairment at work. So we're looking at that, and I'm mentoring some of his youth that he's employed around particularly not albinism, but around particularly impairment and disability, and how to own yourself and your story and being able to manage yourself and focus on your personal development in order to empower yourself as a person with an impairment.
Hilton finds Abongile's help and advocacy very necessary, not just for his company, but for the entire corporate space.
Part of the relationship that we've had the last, perhaps more active the last 2-3 years, was about the marginalization of people with impairment, in particular the workspace, but more specifically the opportunities for those individuals with ideas. The journey for me has been interesting because, you know, we have 7 million youth in this country, 4.5 million are unemployed, around 18% of South African society, you know, have impairments or live with impairments. Abs, you know, she was a talented learner at school. She went to go study here and abroad. You know, represented South Africa on many platforms, is an advocate, you know, an ambassador for not just albinism, but the broader ecosystem of, you know, people with impairment or persons with impairment. I'm like, that's what she does for me, and I keep on using the wrong word, like disability, you know, instead of impairment, right?
Hilton is excited about Abs' bright future and wishes her only the best.
You know, for me, the one thing that I can say to Abs is that the stuff that she has, that she's walked in her own personal journey, the knowledge that she has, no one has. I'm like, the stuff that comes out of her brain, you know, all those things are factual. No one can stand up against it. Abs don't stop, because if you stop, this work goes back 100 years.
From one incredible woman to another, we now get up close and personal with CEO of Agility SA. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Bonisile Roberts.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for gracing us with your presence during this.
Bonisile has a rich biography, and hers is a story of a woman thriving and shining. She let us in on her upbringing and more.
I actually would love to refer to myself as an activist, but through everyday life. I work in an industry that is predominantly male. My activism is through everyday work. My activism is through what I do. I don't actively, sit or stand at a corner and shout, I am an activist, or say, not that there's anything wrong or and so on, but my level of activism comes in educating people that it is possible. You can do it by them seeing me actually doing it.
Bonisile says when she was born, her father was given an ultimatum by his family to leave her mom or they disown him.
Upon my birth, this is stories now I'm being told by my mother. My parents were no longer together and they were forced to split up mainly because of family rifts that arose as a result of my being a person with albinism. So I was then raised as by a single parent, and she raised me as an individual. You were an individual first, you were a child first, and you could do whatever you set your mind to do. And then only factor in your condition only in instances where you feel you need to. So that's how I was raised. As a child, my mother made sure that all kids put on sunscreen. It wasn't a matter of, oh, this one is special or this one is different and has to be treated differently. So, everything we did was the same. If you need to put on sunscreen, everybody must put on sunscreen. If you're wearing glasses, many other kids are wearing glasses. The activism part for me really only came when I was in primary school, when you would start hearing people calling you names, and you're now starting to realize that actually I am different because people are referring to me by a name that is not my name. I am not Umlungu, I am Bonisile, I am not all these other derogatory names that I won't mention. I am Bonisile. So that's the first time I really came to realize that, I am different, and what is it about this difference? The beauty with my mother is that she was a nurse, so the albinism component was purely a medical one. She explained it from a medical perspective, a lack of pigmentation in your eyes, in your skin, in your hair, and that may affect your vision, and that's why you wear glasses. That's all there is to it. And because of that, she had reduced it to just a condition.
One of the things that she was challenged with was her vision.
Got to matric, I was in the top 2, finished my matric, several distinctions, and decided I wanted to go to UP, University of Pretoria, to do my BCom in investment management. That's where the biggest challenge came. For me personally with learning, because I couldn't learn the way I had at school. It's a big lecture hall. There are 400 plus students in a lecture. So you can't just go to the one teacher and say, please read out loud what you are writing. So I went to the lectures separately and I said, can you provide me your lecture notes in writing prior to the lesson so I can be able to interact during the lesson? And it helped me because you can then prepare for a lecture before it happens. And you seem smarter because you know a bit more before the rest of the kids do. But I must say, having to always teach people how to adapt and adjust to me forced me from childhood to be verbal and to be articulate and express if I have challenges.
Today, Bonisile leads a life that is not far from completely perfect. She beamed with joy when we asked her who she is outside work.
Sure, Bonisile is a mother of a beautiful 3-year-old. She brings so much life into our home. I am a wife to a wonderful husband, which is so very understanding of the environment I find myself in and the very tight schedules that I have. I am a daughter, I am a friend, I'm a sister, and all these wonderful things. I'm active after work, but predominantly with family.
One of her dreams is to one day have a chat with the president.
Well, if I had 2 minutes with the president, I would say changing the narrative is not a once-off thing. Changing the way people perceive things, the way people do things, and making it a norm is a process, but one that has to be done rigorously and unapologetically and consistently. Consistency is key. So I would say it's something you have to make sure that you drive, not only through your policies, Mr. President, but it's something that you drive through anything that the state controls.
Today on Stories Untold, we touch base with change makers, people who are making a mark in the corporate space, and they are, of course, advocates. But we'd also like to introduce you to the diverse and colorful community, which is the community of people with albinism.
Although Abongile and Bonisile's stories sound different, their message is the same. Inclusion and diversity are not just acts of goodwill, but a necessity. We caught up with them at an event that aims to create a platform for dialogues and uncomfortable conversations that need to be heard.
My understanding, conversations like these seek to change the conventional narrative of what albinism awareness is about, to move it away from what has been known, which regards, stereotypes and myths and historical beliefs around albinism, to real daily challenges that one faces as part of one's daily living.
And as for people who need to be here, I think social development needed to be here. They needed to understand more than just the disability grant, but the social aspects of dealing with climate change in society. I think Department of Environment and Forestry and Water should have been here so that they can understand that this is a reality and that in their mitigation and adaptation policies, this is something that they should think about. Albinism, and how it impacts persons with albinism and vulnerable communities, that needs to be something they put at their forefront in their tables of discussion.
We also met a couple that was part of the speakers for the day. Parents to Ratilwe and Rorisang Mazindo. They also believe in this good cause.
I think that firstly, as professionals in psychology in the field that we are in, we already had that battle, But when we then gave birth to children with albinism, I think the battle became broader and it became more personal. And in my eyes, the battle is that we are divided as humanity. And what's most important is that when we begin to have such awarenesses or conversations, we're actually bridging the gap, between the division that we ourselves have caused, I think having these conversations, I think also having these kind of conferences and awarenesses will help my children in the next 5-10 years, because at least they will be able to grow up in a world that is less divided. Do I honestly think that such stigmas will completely go away? It's unfortunate that they might not, but that shouldn't weaken us, right? From wanting to continue the fight, to continue the conversation, to continue, activism, to just keep pushing. We have to. It feels like it's a drop in the ocean, but every drop adds up eventually. And so in the next 5-10 years, my daughters will look back and say, but our mother was able to join in the struggle, join in, this fight.
While we came here, it's on top of contributing as parents of children with albinism. We are new in the albinism community, and we are here to learn the stories of persons living with albinism from their perspective, so that we can tell it louder from our perspective and from where we are sitting, and as people with pigmentation, and join in the activism that seeks to create equal space for persons with albinism and other people who are different but marginalized.
Kevin is a professional in the media space. He expressed his sentiments in this way.
In my space, there's still lack of inclusion, because you can count the people. I mean, I can walk into an event and there's only going to be me in that event. But the point that I'm also trying to make is that we are part of society. The main important thing is that people are aware that we exist in society and doing amazing in society. Hence, a month cannot pass without seeing somebody with a certain disability on television, telling their story, expressing themselves, and happy doing it as well.
The first ever Miss Albinism Free State and recently crowned Miss Albinism SA 2021 to 2022, Lerato Sithibe was also in attendance. We were lucky to hear her message before load shedding spoiled the beautiful event.
What I can honestly say, for persons with disabilities to take up their own space is not that easy. But you know what, it takes, I can say, confidence to come out of your comfort zone and fulfill your dreams. I told myself that I don't want to live in regret and I want to be an example to the next generation. So I have to be an example. I have to set a mark, to my generation. So let me go out there with confidence, even though it's not going to be easy, it's going to be challenging, but yes, I'm going to make it.
And on that note, we end our show here for today. A special thank you to our featured guests who opened up our mind, educated us, and reintroduced us to how we have come to understand and engage with albinism. In other words, they are taking that first step to humanizing albinism. From myself, Pulemo Lebati, and the rest of the Stories Untold team, we encourage you to engage with us on social media at Stories Untold TV. Let's do this again, same time, same place. Goodbye.